unfortunately. There was violence in the Jewish community just this past weekend. A mosque was vandalized in Brooklyn just days ago. Hate is tearing our city apart, and we needed to stop. We needed to characterize some of us as being more in New York than others, as if some of us belong here more than other people. And I am here to say that that is wrong. None of us is more in New York than anyone else. We all belong here. Am I right?
Yes.
This is a city for everyone. The kind of leadership we need is going to bring us together. And the fact is that Asian Americans have certainly felt what it's like to be cast as not belonging, as not New York, as not American, but that has also happened to the Jewish community, to the Muslim community, to the Latino community,
Absolutely.
to the Black community. It's happened to just about every community in New York at different times. And today it's an Asian man getting shoved onto the subway tracks. Tomorrow it's going to be someone else victimized on the basis of their race. It has to stop, it has to end, and it starts with new leadership. It starts with leaders that will not divide us, that will not cast up false barriers between us, but say we are all in this together. Yeah. That New York City is a place for every single one of us. I'm going to ask a question that's been on the minds of many New Yorkers over the last number of days. Who is responsible for our safety on the subways? And you have to take a moment to reflect on this, because you know that the state has responsibility for the MTA and the subways, but then the mayor has responsibility for NYPD transit. This arrangement is not working. We need to have one entity that is responsible for our safety on the subways, and it should be the mayor.
Mayor in New York City, absolutely, 1,000%.
This is why I have asked for mayoral control of the subways and buses.
Thank you.
It does not make any sense that we're dividing up responsibility for our safety and having the mayor and the governor go back and forth as to whose responsibility
Exactly.
is.
100%.
That is not right. We know that things work better when you have accountability. And right now there's a lack of accountability in New York City. Who's accountable for the threats that so many community members are facing every single day? I have committed to reducing street homelessness in our city by more than 50% over the next number of months, because we know that's right for us. And half of the victims of anti-Asian violence in our city were victimized by someone who is struggling with mental illness. And if you have someone who's walking our streets or on our subways who's mentally ill, and they see someone who does not look like them, sometimes they will act out in violent and terrible ways. We all see it. We all know that this is happening, and we have to change it. I will fix this as mayor. I will reduce street homelessness and get mentally ill people on our streets the help that they need and into better environments. This is the kind of leadership we've been waiting for and somehow have not been getting out of City Hall this past number of weeks and months. And again, I call upon everyone in this race to say that all of us belong here in New York, and that characterizing anyone as being less New York than someone else on the basis of their race or religion or any other background is wrong. And I will stand against that and make it so that there is no place for hate on any basis here in New York City. I now want to welcome someone who grew up not that far from here, my incredible wife, Evelyn, who's going to speak about her experience these last number of days. Let's give it up for my wife, Evelyn Yang.
So I want to address something that has been heavy on my chest. Some of you know by now that I was born and raised in Queens. Andrew has been living in Manhattan for the last 25 years. We met here, we got married in City Hall, we had our boys here, and they go to school here. Anytime someone implies that we are not New Yorkers, that we are not from here, that we don't belong here, that we should go back to where we came from, it is exactly what it sounds like. It's racism. I'm not talking about one-offs or innocent mistakes. I'm talking about a pattern that we have noticed since the first day that we entered this race. It is deliberate and it is toxic. People have consistently implied that we're not from here and that we don't belong here. Regardless of what you think about Andrew and his plans for New York, regardless if you support another candidate in this race, I don't care. It is not okay to use Andrew to make Asians the butt of racist jokes. Especially during this time of unprecedented racial tension. A time when Asians are being randomly attacked on our streets just because of how they look. And this is very important, told to go back where they came from. Yesterday, a number of my friends sent me a cartoon from the Daily News with a note saying, I can't believe how racist this is. When I saw it, I couldn't believe my eyes. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, or maybe you saw it and you don't understand, I want to show you. This is the cartoon. Let me break it down for you, in case you can't see clearly. Thank you, Ron. This cartoonist disfigured Andrew's face. He has overtly beady, slanted eyes. Now, these white people standing here on the other side have larger eyes and human irises. They're calling Andrew, this Asian man, a tourist coming from who knows where, but probably from a land of other people who look just like him with his shifty, beady eyes. Now, this is the worst thing about what happened. When people discovered this cartoon, which was originally published online first, there was a public outcry from prominent API leaders. We contacted the Daily News. We told them, this is unacceptable. This is racist. This perpetuates the perpetual trope of the foreign, the Asian foreigner, the perpetual Asian foreigner. Now, there's a lot of historical context for this that I won't get into today, but you know, not only does this dehumanize Asians, it promotes racism against them.
Absolutely.
And you know what they did?
They printed it.
They printed it
Absolutely.
anyway.
They don't care.
What message does this send to all the Asians
Disgusting.
that are afraid to go outside every day with our children? What message are we sending when we can do this in the most diverse city in the country, in the most progressive city in the country? What message are we sending? We have seen the same treatment used against Black and brown people in the past. When people of color are presented with exaggerated racist features, we know what that means. It's not funny, it's toxic, and it's hurtful. Images can be even more powerful than words. And just look at this page. I couldn't get over the irony of this page. On one half, we remember George Floyd and his death, his murder, and the movement that was born from his murder. A movement towards racial equity and racial justice. This part by Al Sharpton condemns racism. This part, in the same paper, perpetuates racism. Now, am so grateful for the movement that George Floyd inspired, because Asians, we've been inspired by that movement, the protests, the rallies. We looked to these inspirations when people in our community were also being targeted and killed because of the color of their skin. Our attitudes about racism are never separate. They are always intertwined. Now, I don't usually get involved in campaign food fights, but I feel compelled to be here to speak about this. It's not about my feelings or Andrew's feelings being hurt, because at this point, we have seen it all. We have seen much worse. Last year, an SNL comedian called Andrew a Jew chink. Now that was blatant. This kind of racism, this is the underhanded kind of racism that is actually more insidious, because at first glance it could pass as a joke. But we have to ask ourselves, why is this a joke? Why was this funny? I mean, our train stop, the Times Square train stop, is literally part of our biography. We have lived in Hell's Kitchen for over 15 years. So Times Square is actually the train station that we go to every day to go home. It's as simple as that. Now, why was that made to be a subject of a cartoon? Why is that funny? It's funny because of the racial context, because there are racial stereotypes behind this joke. Just think about it for a moment, and you will find that it's true. If we replace this Asian man with a black man or a white man or even a Martian, would this be as funny? No, it wouldn't be as funny. Now that racist humor is causing bloodshed on our streets, Asians terrorized, beat up, and left for dead just because they're Asian. And other people don't think that we belong here. It is very hard to explain this to our children. Stop promoting hate. Words matter, art matters, representation matters. So let's be better than this. Every time you make a joke about Andrew not being a New Yorker, you are telling Asian Americans that they don't belong. That's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. And now we're going to hear from Assembly Member Ron Kim from Queens. Come on up, Ron.
First, let me say I want to thank Evelyn for your remarks today. When I sat down with you and Andrew a few weeks ago, a couple months ago now, you were saying you didn't like the spotlight, you didn't like all the online trolls, it was very hurtful to your family, and you toned out, you didn't want to be involved. But for you to step in now, it means that this is not right, and you can't. Thank you. I appreciate it. Vote for Andrew Yang. Appreciate it. Thank you. But right on. Thank you. So, Evelyn, we love you too.
Yes,
We love you too.
respond to him,
Thanks.
man.
So, let me just say, for Evelyn to step in this kind of capacity, it means that something's not going right. And you didn't point out one very important fact that one of your staff members actually picked up. The original photo had no eyes on Andrew. This is the original photo that was published by the Daily News. It had no eyes. So after some criticism and leaders pushing back, they made an adjustment. All right, so Andrew got a couple of eyes. on the picture. Yeah, that fixed the problem, right? That really addresses the racism in this picture. And before I dive into this, before I forget, I want to thank the operator. I think his name was Tom something, who saved the victim's life just a few blocks away. He stopped the train before he ran over the victim when the victim was pushed in this heinous hate crime. His name was Tom Madetil. If I mispronounced it, I'm sorry. Thank you for being a hero, for just stopping that train, and thank you for the Samaritans who went in to the subway to save the victim. And for this community, for our neighbors, if you know the perpetrator, the attacker, please, it is your responsibility to say something. Because without accountability at the very local level, there is no justice. We have to hold individuals accountable and get to the root cause of the violence and the hatred that we are seeing right now. So where is the violence and hatred coming from? It comes from microaggressive behaviors. It comes from the Daily News publishing these type of images against Asians. All these things add up to the violence and the hatred. This reminds me of last year at the beginning of the pandemic, when the first virus came to New York from Europe, and it was actually like Westchester. All the media was portraying was Flushing in Chinatown, as if we brought the virus to New York City. That had an intangible impact on the way the public perceived Asian Americans. And this image right now, we demand the public apology as soon as possible and be taken down. It's not acceptable to continue to portray Asians as if we are perpetual foreigners who do not belong in this country. Andrew Yang, he belongs, and Andrew Yang will be the next mayor of New York City. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. We're now going to welcome State Assemblyman Dan Rosenthal. Dan.
It is a tumultuous time in New York City, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the community that I belong to has been subject to the sort of vitriol and hatred that requires universal condemnation. Andrew Yang has been a source of comfort and healing to communities by showing us that there is a brighter future ahead. Because Andrew is not about words, he's about actions. After the news broke about the assaults in Brooklyn, Andrew met with the victims of that assault, comforted them and spoke to them and made it very clear that we are all welcome here in New York City. That is the kind of unifying leadership our city needs right now. And Andrew might not say this, but some in the media and rival campaigns are taking advantage of what is a cancer in our society, and that is an anti-Asian sentiment. You have major newspapers perpetuating tropes of Asian Americans. You have rival campaigns being dismissive and derisive about an individual that has capitulated transformational ideas to a national prominence. He is someone who has graduated from Ivy League colleges and law schools. He is being maligned, and it's incredibly disrespectful. There is nothing more New York about someone who came here 25 years ago, married a woman from Bayside, and sends his 2 kids to New York City public schools. What is more New York than that? Yeah. Some in the media and in rival campaigns need to take a long, hard look in the mirror at the anti-Asian tropes and dog whistles that they continue to amplify, and the fact that they are willing to amplify them in order to try to win an election. Candidates and campaigns who are willing to amplify these tropes for their own political gain aren't going to unify and heal this city in the way that we need. Enough is enough.
Thank you. Thank you.
And now we're going to hear from City Council candidate right here in District 20, Sandra Ong.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Evelyn, for your words. My name is Sandra Ong. I'm running for New York City Council District First, I want to express my sympathy and thoughts to the family of this victim. As Andrew said, it's one of the greatest fears that you'll be shoved on a train while being on a train platform, and it must have been a very traumatizing experience for him and his family. Second, I want to express there's no room in our community, in our country, for any violence, hateful words, hateful insinuations, racist jokes. Look around all of us. We all belong here, and the message has been loud and clear, and we all have to work together and make sure that that message gets out throughout this campaign and throughout the rest of this country. Thank you so much.
And now we'll hear from City Council candidate Julie Wong here in District 26.
My name is Julie Wong, and I'm a City Council candidate in this very district. I used to live right up the block, and I'm on the board of 696 Build Queensbridge, also known as Community Capacity Development, which is an anti-violence organization right here in Queensbridge. It has proven to reduce violence by reinvesting our funds into community-led solutions that are holistic, that address violence at the root causes, as well as racism, by providing education opportunities, mental health opportunities, and holistic opportunities for those who need help, like supportive housing and financial literacy. Right now, the message is clear for every speaker that has spoken. We all deserve to feel safe in the city that we call home. No matter how long you've been here, whether it's been 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, 50 years, whether you're a first-generation New Yorker, second-generation New Yorker, everyone gets to call New York City home, and you deserve to feel safe while you're sitting in the subway, you're walking on a platform of the subway, or down the street. What you've all witnessed just now, as AAPI candidates right now in New York City are sharing very personal stories of their own personal racism. I myself, as a city council candidate, cannot count how many times people have said, "Why do you call yourself a woman of color? Asian Americans are not people of color." That is simply untrue. That is why we're standing here in AAPI Heritage Month, mourning the fact that an AAPI in our very own community was pushed into the subway track to die. And as we're standing here, we have people in our community that are screaming racist slurs at us at this very moment. What this shows us is exactly what they're asking for us to show up not just for ourselves, but our black and brown brothers and sisters, against Islamophobia, against racism for black and brown people, over racial profiling and more policing. Is simply not something that's going to unite us. And that is why we're here to say that we're not going to stand for anti-Semitism. We're not going to stand against xenophobia. We're all here to say that we need to be united. And what keeps us safe? We keep us safe. And that's what we saw in the subway. When random Samaritans saw what was happening, they did not stay as a bystander, just wishing and waiting for someone else to step in, but they all stepped in, gave a hand into the subway tracks, and pulled him out. And that's what we need to do. We have to keep each other safe. I hope that you will remember to make sure that every time you're walking somewhere and you see someone getting screamed at, whether they're Asian, whether they're black, whether they're brown, Muslim, white, you say no to racism, you say no to prejudice, you say no to violent crimes, and we keep each other safe. Thank you so much.
And now we'll hear from City Council candidate Roger Khan, also in District 26.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I specifically said that just because being a Muslim woman, growing up in New York City, had a difficult time. So I can understand with my Asian brother and sister how they're suffering. I do want to say the person victim who actually was pushed, that is sad at this time and age. We belong here. We grow up here. Our children are here. We need safe in our community. We need to protect one another, no matter what color you are. You're black, you're Chinese, you're Asian, you're Filipino, anything, Latino. I'm Muslim, and I want to say that we need to stand together and protect one another. We don't need this in our city. We don't need this in our district. What we need is one another to protect one another. And it's sad today, again and again it's happening. Especially to my mom who wears a hijab. She can't go out to the corner, especially after people get out of the mosque. People cannot talk, they have a hat on. During Eid, people attacking everyone. Why? Why should we have that? These kids need to know we're friends, family, we're neighbors, we need to protect one another. And I want to thank everyone who come out here because this is a very, very neighborhood that we have many different races of people that come here through the trains, to the station. We need this power to be in the mayor's hands so we can protect ourselves. And I want people to know that I'm here, again, to help one another, to understand one another. I don't want to be in this racist city. I want to be in a comfortable city. I want people to like me no matter who you are, no matter where you are. Andrew, thank you for coming out here. And thank you that I'm here to support anti-hate, anti-race. And I'm running in this district. Doesn't mean in every district. We need everyone to stand up against every race. Thank you very much, everyone. Assalamu alaikum again. And I hope to see you guys more in this neighborhood. Thank you.
And now please welcome City Council candidate for District 38, Yu Lin. This way. Sorry about that.
First of all, I would like to thank Andrew for running as the mayor of New York City. Just think about it. If a mayoral candidate is being attacked on the basis of his color, what would other immigrants, other Asian Americans will face in reality of life? Now, let me tell you, last week when I visited a nightclub building in Radford area, there was a family. They told me that they've been knocked on doors throughout the pandemic. For what? People coming here to ask for money, strictly. Said, can I have some money? And then when he gives them some money, next day that person will come back again and say, I need food, I need detergent, I need clothes. Now, why that woman, when the first time that woman gave them the money, the food, it was out of charity. But then the third time, it was out of fear. She was afraid that if she didn't give it to them, she'll be attacked. Her family will be attacked. Now, the fact that Andrew runs the mayoral campaign and is being attacked, that really sheds light on the tip of the iceberg of racism that we're dwelling upon as New Yorkers. And that's not right. And I really appreciated this campaign that Andrew is being great enough, knowledgeable, to attack on that iceberg. And I do believe that he's also capable, if elected to be the mayor of New York, to end that racism and end those public unsafety in subway, in our public, and also on the streets. Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe we can do it.
Thank you.
Let's work together.
Thank you. Thank you. And now the last speaker is President of Place NYC, Yatin Chu.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yatin Chu. I'm a citizen of New York City, and it's just terrible hearing week after week and almost on a daily basis the atrocities that are put upon our Asian Americans in New York City. I've been a New Yorker since age 9 here, and I take the subway. I took the subway to Bronx High School Science when I turned 15. I've been taking the subway every day, taking my kids to school, and to think of the worst thing that could happen is standing on a platform, minding your own business, and being shoved into the tracks. That is definitely New Yorkers' worst nightmare, and certainly one of mine. I'm here to speak against the anti-Asian incidents, the attacks, anti-Semitic attacks that's happening throughout the city. We're New Yorkers. We need to be kind to each other and respect each other. And it really is hurtful to see that there's so much going on in a city that I love. And I, with 4 other parents, had co-authored a letter about a month ago to really ask our New York City public schools and our leaders to back a curriculum that strengthens what is being taught to our students in public schools. We really need to start educating everyone the importance of Asian American history, why we belong here, what we've contributed to American history. I think it's vital. As an education advocate, I believe that education is the path to improve everything that's going on around us, and starting with kids from the youngest age. I know there's legislation that Congresswoman Grace Meng is backing, as well as Senator John Liu is backing. And they certainly have the backing and support of public school families and moms like me who are really concerned about what's happening. And I hope that the attention that the media is giving, as well as all of the elected officials, as well as candidates running for office, that it sheds a light on really what's happening. And it's really scary for the average citizen, and I hope that we can invest in education to bring about change. Thank you so much.
And now we'll take some questions. Starting with Julia.
Mr. Yang, you talked about kind of the twofold impetus behind these incidents involving Asian Americans and Asians in the city, one being mental illness and one being hate crimes. So I'd just like to ask two questions. The first, do you support the expanded use of Kendra's law in terms of the mentally ill who are committing these crimes?
I'm going to tell a story. Sorry, it's going to be a long-winded answer. So some of you know, a couple of months ago, I was on the Staten Island ferry, and a mentally ill man attacked a photographer who was with our group, shoved him to the ground. I went to help and de-escalated the situation in part because the man recognized me. By the time the police interviewed the man, he was not aggressive, and so they let him go with a warning. 4 weeks later, that attacker then beat an elderly Asian man on the subway, a 67-year-old Sri Lankan man. And I saw this and was horrified because I thought, I met that man. That man was mentally ill and he needed help. Now, the photographer he attacked on the Staten Island ferry was white. The Asian man he beat on the subway, it reads as a hate crime, but that man was going to do something violent at some point to someone. And so we needed to get him the help that he needed. And the fundamental challenge right now in New York City is this: how do we get people help when they need help but are not standing up and seeking help? And so this is a challenge that we can address as a city. The standard for getting someone medical attention and off of our streets has to be what it was in earlier times, which is if someone is in distress, mentally ill, inebriated, unconscious, unresponsive, we get them to a hospital, we give them a couple of days of medical attention, in some cases medication, we clean them up, and then we bring them to a supportive environment. Right now, the standard is all wrong, where the person often who's struggling and is lacking the capacity to actually seek help is not actually standing up, raising their hand and saying, hey, I need medical attention. So this is something that New Yorkers see around us every single day, and we can deliver. We can do better. This has just been a leadership and policy failure on the part of our city and our city's leaders. This is what I will change as mayor.
But do you support the expanded use of Kendra's law to address this very issue that you're talking about?
We need to be able to get people the help that they need on behalf of the city.
So even when it's against their will to have medication, to go into supervised living facilities, court ordered, you support that?
We just invested as a city in mental health intervention centers that right now are going unused for this very purpose, which is to bring someone to a place that's not a police station, that actually has the mental health resources that would do them the most good. So we need to make use of those resources.
But people should be forced to go there against their will, yes or no?
If they are in one of these categories I'm describing, then we should bring them and get them the help they need. Dave?
Andrew, can I just, at the very beginning of your comments, and I think Evelyn also mentioned this, but you talked about other candidates who are making you feel less New York, and they've made comments. Who are you referring to? And I have a follow-up.
Anyone who's been observing the campaigns knows what I'm talking about, so I'll just leave it to you to just go through people's past statements.
Okay, so, I mean, Eric Adams, Maya, Stringer, they've been critical of you, but do you see their criticism of you not being up to speed on certain issues as racist?
Again, I'll leave it to you to go through past statements and make your own determination as to whether they're making an argument that some people are somehow less New York than others.
But by saying you didn't know 50A and that issue, and you didn't know about the chokehold stuff,
I'm talking about
racist?
Statements that are over the course of a campaign that's been going on for months. So you're referring to statements that have come out in the last couple of days. If you go back over the last number of months, you will find plenty of statements that indicate exactly what I'm talking about.
But why not call it out the way that you know, your wife and Assemblyman Kim called out the Daily News and said, we want an apology, we want a retraction. Why not call it out and make it clear who you think is perpetuating this racism?
Well, initially, my hope is that, you know, I'd give someone the benefit of the doubt, and that a particular statement in an area saying something like "Welcome to New York," I just chalked it up to politics. But if you have a pattern, particularly in an era when Asians are being cast as foreign and even being victimized on the basis of their race, then it becomes impossible to ignore. Aaron?
I was going to ask the same question actually, but I just want to follow up. Can you specify, because they've attacked you on a lot of different things, some of it has been, you know, cultural stuff, you know, a bodega, Times Square subway station, this and that. Other things have been policy issues that they feel that you're not knowledgeable enough about, such as 50A, such as the MTA. So can you just specify which attacks you think are out of bounds as opposed to what's, you know, legitimate debate and criticism?
It's the whole narrative. Okay, these questions that we're getting about, like, call out the specific, like, why do you look so confused around, like, is this racist? Okay, when other council members or elected officials, you know, people running for office, the Asian Americans in this country, this is our lived experience. We are experiencing these microaggressions. The narrative around how we are somehow more foreign, less of this place, and everything that feeds into that, all of the minutia, the details, you know, if they are treated completely independently, they disappear into the ether. But when you wrap it up into this toxic narrative of, oh, Andrew Yang is not a New Yorker. He's not from here. He doesn't belong here. Why doesn't he go back to where he comes from? It's the same thing like this article, like this cartoon. It wouldn't work if Andrew was an Asian. It wouldn't work. Piling up all the little attacks around, oh, he didn't know the name of this. He called the bodega, that people on Twitter don't think it's a bodega, even though the shop owner calls it a bodega. Where would that go? But you wrap it into the narrative that, oh, this means Andrew is not a New Yorker. That's what's toxic. And that's what I want people to understand.
I will say too.
Yeah.
I'll say too that the people of New York, when I talk to them on the streets, we all care about the same things. We care about safety. We care about getting jobs back, getting businesses back open, getting our kids back in school. These are the things New Yorkers care about. We're going to win this race in part because we're presenting a different approach to leadership that is more positive and optimistic and unifying and confident. You know, we don't feel a need to drag other candidates. We're going to win on the basis of our vision for the city, and I cannot wait to get to work.
Andrew, before you go, can I ask a question, if you don't mind? A year ago, right immediately after George Floyd was murdered, we had tens of thousands of New Yorkers of every race, black, white, Asian, Latino, all marching together in unity. Now, a year later, we see all these attacks on Asian Americans, and we seem to be seeing a hatred and race problem in the city. If you become mayor, what type of specific programs would you do to try and deal with those race issues after you become mayor?
I think the first thing you have to do is set a tone. I think it would be a very powerful statement for our city and even our country to have the first Asian American mayor in the history of New York. And I had an Italian American fireman and a black public sector worker just come up to me and say, I hope you win because it would be a very, very positive statement about New York City and the type of people that can live here and contribute here and even leave here. So I would want to govern with that as the unifying message, where this is going to be a New York that works for everyone, of every background, of every community, whether it's Muslims, Jewish, black, white, Asian, Latino. I'm going to help make this a city that everyone is proud to call home. And it starts with making clear that there is no place for hatred and racism in New York City.
Andrew, I got a quick question.
Andrew,
quick question. No candidate has addressed this yet. It has to do with education and the hatred that's coming from the DOEs
Chancellor former Carranza and the current Chancellor Porter. The Asians are majority representative of the specialized high schools. And the racism that starts in the DOE school system spills over to the streets, the trains. I'm asking you, if you're elected mayor, what will you do with the racist Misha Porter, who's the current DOE, and she could not even congratulate the 4,000, predominantly 70% Asian children of their acceptance into the specialized high school? I am not Asian, but I stood up all over New York City, and we met in East Harlem the other day. And I agree with your comment about taking the mayoral control and stopping the Asian hate. The hate begins in the school system. If the hate is in the school system, it will never end anywhere else. So I'm asking you.
The hate begins at home.
When you become mayor, if you become mayor, what will you do or who will you appoint so that we can have, and my child is not Asian, that we can have a DOE chancellor of all 1 million children in New York City that is fair and that will not discriminate against Asian children, will not reduce the quantity